Oh, look. What is that? It's a tiny clay bottle of some kind, pottery. Maybe it has a genie in it. Oh. You're kidding me. For my first wish, I want 1,000 more wishes.
What do you think I am? Some genie in a... Oh, wait.
God is not our genie.
It misses the mark to treat the Lord like a genie.
God is not a genie in a bottle. God is not somebody that we can just constantly go to and expect things from.
Some people really do believe that the God of the universe has been turned into a genie that just goes around answering prayers like Bruce Almighty, typing yes, 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 yes.
I want a hot tub, more cash, and bigger arms, but I confuse God the Father with the good luck charm.
You must believe he's not a genie in a bottle! Yeah, he's not a genie.
A lot of people I've encountered really treat God and really treat God's grace as if it was a genie.
God is not a genie. He's not a genie. He's not a genie. So if you're praying for something and expecting God to just drop the answer on your lap, it's not going to happen.
Basically, the guys that see Jesus as nothing more than a genie in a bottle that they can rub, and whatever they desire, he's just going to grant wishes.
Is that, y'all, is this, God is not a genie in a bottle.
But let's not fall into the deceit that so much of the church is in today, to think that God is our genie.
So often we treat Jesus like a genie in a bottle.
Is God more of a genie to you, or is he more of a father to you? You got to stop trying to control that where you're the asker and he's the giver.
And that you keep in mind that he's not a genie. We can't just pray when we need something.
This claim that God is not a genie who will give you whatever you ask for is interesting because, believe it or not, it's in direct opposition to several passages in the Bible. So let's do something most Christians have never done. Actually take a look at the passages that contradict the common belief that good old Yahweh is not a genie in a bottle. Matthew 18, verse 19. Again, truly I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. Wait, I hear someone screaming in the background.
That's a mistranslation of the original Arabic. It's out of context. Jesus was just speaking figuratively. He was only directing that promise to the 12 disciples. It's allegory. It's metaphor. It's irony.
Just hold your horses, Pilgrim, and we'll look at this thing logically and thoroughly. First of all, there's only one condition associated with getting whatever you ask for. Just agree with one other Christian about it. If two Christians agree about what they ask for, it will be granted. Not may be granted, or granted 2,000 years later, or not granted at all. Will be granted. As for there being any translation error, all modern Bibles say the same thing. If two Christians agree, then God will give them what they ask for. But does the context of chapter 18 alter the meaning of the verse? Well, I'd hate to be accused of jerking it out of context. So why don't we just have a quick look at the context? First of all, Christians would no doubt agree that everything in chapter 18 except for verses 18 and 19 is directed at all Christians. Thus, the question that immediately pops into my mind is, why did Jesus couch this disciples-only promise inside a host of other teachings that are all directed at believers? Why would Jesus be teaching common doctrines that apply to all Christians, then suddenly, and without any verbal warning or indication, direct this get anything you want via prayer concept at the 12 disciples only? No writer or speaker does such a thing. Another option is that all of Matthew 18 is directed toward only the 12 disciples. Let's test that idea. So, in Matthew 18, Jesus saying one must become like a child to enter the kingdom of God really only applies to the immediate 12 disciples. And in verse 8, when Jesus says, "Wherefore if thy hand or thy foot offend thee, cut them off, and cast them from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life halt or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into everlasting fire." He only meant the immediate 12 disciples. And verse 15, "Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother." That's just for the disciples. Christians don't have to reconcile arguments between each other. Then we have the enigmatic binding and loosing verse, which precedes verse 19. "Verily I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Then we have verse 20. "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them." So are we to believe Jesus means that wherever 2 or 3 of the original 12 disciples are gathered, Jesus is with them, but if the average Christian meets another believer, Jesus is not there? We've clearly just ruled out that chapter 18 is only directed toward the 12 disciples, and we've also just ruled out that someone would be talking about all believers, do a 180 and start secretly directing 2 verses only at the 12 disciples with absolutely no indication he had suddenly changed his intended target group, then do a 180 again and start talking about all Christians again. We've also ruled out a translational error, as all modern Bibles agree on what this verse means. The only answer that makes good sense is that all of chapter 18 is directed at all Christians. The problem is that Christians throughout the ages have realized that they cannot bind anything in heaven or on earth via prayer, whatever that means, and they certainly cannot get anything they ask for, even if it's a good thing or God's will. Thus, they are forced into the unenviable position of having to reinterpret the clear and correct meaning of the passage, violate its context, and say that it was only meant for the original 12 disciples. But is this just a random promise by Jesus? Maybe this was just something that got altered during the course of writing the Gospel of Matthew and became inflated by mistake. Matthew 21:22, "And whatever things you ask in prayer, believing, you will receive." Well, so much for that idea. Apparently, Jesus wasn't aware that God was not a genie in a bottle. And even worse, Jesus puts no 3-wish limit on it either. It is a clear promise with only a small fine print that you believe you'll receive what you ask for. And as for the context of the verse, this time it does lend itself to a disciple-only promise, but let me counter by saying this. The disciples were a literary tool for the readers to eavesdrop on. In other words, Jesus teaches the disciples and characters in the stories, but the teachings are meant for every Christian. Every reader sees him or herself as a disciple of Jesus. Readers experience Jesus vicariously through the disciples and others he spoke with or healed. There are not any special exceptions for the 12 disciples. They are just available at all times for Jesus to use to convey parables, wisdom, and promises. Thus, when he says, "If ye have faith and doubt not, ye shall not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but also if ye shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, it shall be done." He is effectively talking to every reader of the Gospel of Matthew. This is just how it works, as we saw in chapter 18, just 3 chapters earlier. Unfortunately, this scene has no extra context that would prove this is the case. So this verse could work both ways. But we still have the previous passage we just looked at, which certainly was directed at all believers. Are there any other passages that make this astounding promise? John 14, verses 13 and 14. And whatever you ask in my name, that I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. Looks as if that'd be a yes. Here we have a similar promise from Jesus, but again, is this directed at only his immediate disciples? We'd better examine the context to make sure we aren't jerking anything completely out of its native habitat. Now, this will take a minute, but it's important for us to look at every preceding verse, which will show beyond any doubt that Jesus' anything you ask promise is a promise directed at every Christian.